There is a profound and unsettling shift happening right in front of our eyes, and if you have been paying attention to the subtle movements in the shadows of the league, you already know that something deeply catastrophic is unfolding behind closed doors, because the powers that be have finally decided to pull the trigger on the most controversial maneuver in the history of women's professional sports. We are not just dealing with internet rumors or unverified locker room gossip anymore, because the veil is being lifted by individuals who are woven directly into the fabric of the sports media machine, and the picture they are painting is absolutely terrifying for anyone who genuinely cares about the integrity of the game. Let us begin with the undeniable bombshell dropped by Mikkel Thompson, who is not just some random voice in the wilderness, but a two-time world champion with the Los Angeles Lakers, the father of Klay Thompson, and a deeply entrenched member of the ESPN Los Angeles broadcasting family. Before the game even tipped off yesterday afternoon, Thompson put a statement out into the world that sent shockwaves through the entire basketball ecosystem, declaring that he heard from a rock-solid, reliable source that the Indiana Fever are completely done with Caitlin Clark, and that the Los Angeles Sparks are actively maneuvering to go get her right now. You have to understand the gravity of a man like Mikkel Thompson, putting his decades of credibility on the line to float a statement like that, because individuals at his level of the media hierarchy do not play reckless games with their sources unless the smoke is billowing from a very real fire. But to truly grasp the sheer magnitude of what is happening, we have to look at the second massive domino to fall, which came directly from Jason Whitlock, a 30-year veteran journalist who cut his teeth in the gritty reality of newsrooms like the Kansas City Star before dominating networks from ESPN to Blaze TV. Whitlock took to his show and completely shattered the illusion of stability in Indiana by emphatically stating that the Fever are actively planning to ship Caitlin Clark to the Los Angeles Sparks, and he did not stop there. He went as far as predicting that UCLA head coach Corey Close is already being positioned to take over the Sparks to usher in this highly orchestrated new era. This is where the outrage should be burning inside every single fan who bought a ticket or tuned in, because what we are witnessing is the calculated dismantling of a generational phenomenon by a Mickey Mouse organization that completely panicked when they were handed the greatest gift the sport has ever seen. The Indiana Fever are owned by Herb Simon and the Pacers organization, and for years they operated this franchise essentially as a quiet little charity project, content with pulling in maybe 4,500 fans a game on a good night in a sleepy arena where nobody asked any difficult questions. Then suddenly the universe drops Caitlin Clark directly into their laps, and literally overnight they are staring down the barrel of 13,000 screaming, passionate, demanding fans filling their stadium and creating a global media circus that this front office was fundamentally ill-equipped to comprehend, let alone manage. Instead of rising to the occasion, they completely buckled under the weight of her stardom, and instead of building a fortress around their golden goose, they allowed a PR nightmare to fester, while petulantly blaming the fans, the media, and independent channels for daring to criticize their staggering incompetence. Can you imagine a legacy franchise in New York or Los Angeles acting with such fragile hostility toward the very people keeping their lights on, because they would be laughed entirely out of the city? But in Indiana, they decided to double down on their own ego. The thrill is completely gone in Indianapolis, and you can see the engineered suppression of her star power playing out in real time if you just look at the damning reality of what happened during the game against Angel Reese and the Atlanta Dream. This was supposed to be a blockbuster matchup, a continuation of the most electric rivalry in the modern era, but instead the arena felt totally lifeless, dead as a doornail, with empty seats glaringly obvious on the television broadcast, while the Atlanta Dream came into their house on a heater and thoroughly outplayed them. The energy has been so aggressively sucked out of the room that a highlight of Caitlin Clark knocking down an incredibly exciting three-pointer was posted by the Fever social media team, and it barely scraped together 140,000 views, which is a total tragedy when you consider that a year ago that exact same play would have instantly generated 5 million views and hijacked the entire internet. They have systematically neutralized her, turning the closest thing this sport has to Superman into a mere character actor, a third option on a team that refuses to let her dominate. And this systematic killing of her momentum is not an accident. It is the necessary groundwork being laid to justify pushing her out the door. You have to ask yourself how an organization could possibly think they can survive the inevitable catastrophic backlash of trading away the face of the league, and the answer lies in the human shield they are desperately trying to assemble right now. They fired Christie Sides, despite a strong second half of the season, because they needed to bring in a regime that could sell this ultimate betrayal to the local fanbase, which is exactly why they rushed to hire Stephanie White and bring back Lynn Dunn as a senior advisor. They are banking their entire survival on the delusion that because Stephanie White is an Indiana native who led Purdue to a national championship, and because Lynn Dunn coached the Fever to a title back in 12 years ago, the fans will simply accept this new culture and forgive them for shipping away the only reason anyone cares about this team. They have surrounded Caitlin Clark with a hand-picked echo chamber, believing that this local credibility will magically insulate them from the absolute firestorm that is coming. But they are completely delusional because nobody in those stands gives a single shred of a damn about the nostalgic glory days of the old guard, when they are paying their hard-earned money exclusively to see number 22 shoot the lights out. The most chilling piece of evidence proving this conspiracy is already in motion came just 2 days ago, when they rolled out Lynn Dunn to speak on a tiny obscure podcast called The Daily Coach, where she unprompted began feeding the public a highly specific narrative about the tough choices leaders have to make regarding team culture. Dunn sat there and explicitly detailed a story from her past about having to kick a superstar off her team for the greater good, claiming the player hated her at the time but eventually thanked her decades later, and the podcast host immediately followed up by framing the conversation around the moral responsibility of letting a toxic star go to protect the team. They are speaking in incredibly loud dog whistles, carefully planting the psychological seeds, so that when the trade is finally announced, they can stand at a podium and declare that moving on from Caitlin Clark was a painful but necessary sacrifice to preserve their sacred culture. This entire smear campaign, the media hit pieces, the local talking heads continuously undermining her. It is all a beautifully orchestrated setup to make Los Angeles look like the only logical escape route for a player who is quite frankly too massive for the small-minded gatekeeping happening in Indiana. Now bring it back to the overarching puppeteer pulling the strings from the very top, because if you look at the historical precedent of how the NBA operates under Adme Selver and the executives who ultimately steer the WNBA ship, this move makes terrifyingly perfect sense. The league has always forced its most transcendental stars out of the Midwest and directly into the blinding lights of Los Angeles. Just look at the blueprints left behind by Wilt Chamberlain, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Shaquille O'Neal, and LeBron James, who were all systematically guided toward the massive media markets when the league needed to elevate its global brand. The WNBA is currently staring down the barrel of a new collective bargaining agreement, and they desperately need to justify the astronomical television rights and corporate sponsorships that are coming, which means they cannot afford to leave their billion-dollar asset trapped in an organization that treats her like a burden instead of an empire. That is precisely why the Los Angeles Sparks are sitting there waiting with open arms, and it is why Corey Close, who just took UCLA to a national championship, was recently making the rounds on a Just Women sports podcast, speaking incredibly favorably about exactly how a generational superstar should be handled effectively, auditioning for the role of Caitlin Clark's next head coach in plain sight. If the Indiana Fever were actually interested in winning and protecting their franchise, they would have taken a flamethrower to their entire front office and cleaned house, bringing in legitimate heavyweights with serious NBA pedigree like Larry Bird, Mark Jackson, Jason Kidd, or Bill Laimbeer to build an impenetrable wall around their star. Instead, they chose petty internal politics and fragile egos, setting the stage for what will undoubtedly go down as a Babe Ruth-level catastrophe. A blunder so profoundly short-sighted that it will haunt the Simon family and the Pacers organization for the next century. You simply do not Thanos snap 13,000 paying fans out of existence and expect your franchise to survive the financial ruin that will follow, because at the end of the day, you never mess with the money, and Caitlin Clark is the only real money this league has ever seen. The die has been cast, the narrative has been planted, and the old guard is desperately trying to convince you that they are acting in the best interest of the game while simultaneously orchestrating the greatest heist in sports history. But the fans are not stupid, and we see exactly what is hiding in the dark.